All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this morning. My name is Rob Coyle. I am the Assistant Vice President for Course Development at University of Maryland Global Campus. It is a pleasure to be here with you and to be here with some of my colleagues to talk about this pretty exciting topic. Two quick logistic items, and then we'll get started. First, just if everyone would please keep your microphones muted. We will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to just type in there, and we will go from there. So let me introduce my colleague, Jen Simonds from UMGC, and Jen can get us started.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jen Simonds, and I'm the Assistant Vice President for Academic Integrity and Accountability at UMGC. We will all introduce ourselves a little bit more at this point. So we're going to start with Kate.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Dr. Kate Cardin. I am the Senior Director for CBE and Curriculum Design at UMGC.
And Rob, you've already introduced your title, but would you like to say a little bit more about your experience with online learning?
Sure. So I've been around online learning for almost 20 years now, I think. I've done the full gamut from working at a community college to an R1 and now at a state institution. I've done a variety of roles. I've taught both online and hybrid courses. My primary focus has been as instructional design. And that continues to be my focus. Now I lead a team of instructional designers and other folks who develop courses. So it's a pretty exciting field, and I love it.
Thank you. And Brandie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brandie Shatto. I am the director, the program director of our educational technology programs at UMGC, which includes an instructional technology program for K-12 teachers, a learning design and technology program that's really geared toward future instructional designers, and a master of distance education, which is really geared toward people who want to lead distance ed programs. And I've been with UMGC for 3.5 years.
Thank you. And my more extended introduction, I'm Dr. Jen Simonds. And I head up the relatively new office of the same name as my title, Academic Integrity and Accountability. And we focus on fostering a culture of integrity and using a learning-focused philosophy to approach promoting integrity, and then, of course, dealing lack of integrity when that occurs. And prior to joining UMGC, my prior titles were Professor of Psychology and Department Chair in a traditional setting at a small liberal arts college. And I served as the national chair for a national psychology department chairs organization that cannot have a clean, easy name. And in terms of my online teaching experience, I was part of the first group at my traditional institution to do online courses and create online courses. And I had the great benefit of a one-on-one coaching situation with an instructional designer for the whole 2 semesters prior to launching my first online course. And I've got to say, it is one of my favorite creative and pedagogical challenges. Okay, in this presentation, we're going to talk about promoting integrity, elements of high quality online learning, making connections and forging relationships, and authentic assessments. And with each of these topics, we're going to tie them back around to academic integrity. And as a reminder, please chat your questions and keep yourself on mute as we go through. So how does design support integrity? Well, first of all, reasons for cheating. So an assumption about online learning is that students cheat just because they have the opportunity to do so. And temptation and opportunity are definitely among reasons that students choose to take unauthorized kinds of shortcuts. But there are other reasons as well. So stress and pressure, and this is what we mostly see in our office at UMGC when students have chosen to take a regrettable choice, is that they were stressed and they were pressed for time and they have a lot of responsibility. Our students are adult learners and they have a lot on their plate. Cheating also happens when extrinsic goals are emphasized, and especially performance being prioritized over mastery, and where there are no costs for cheating. Something else that happens, and here's where we really get into the connections with design, is that students cheat more often when they perceive that the instructional quality is poor, when they dislike a class, when they find it boring, unorganized, or when they perceive that the instructor is not engaged and that the instructor doesn't care about students. And something else we know is that for folks involved in online learning, there's a myth out there that, oh, cheating only happens in online learning because there's so many opportunities for that. Well, that is really not the case. Research shows that it is a similar rate, and really it varies by category depending on settings, but that is definitely a myth. And something else that's very important to think is that all cheating and academic misconduct, very little of it is the egregious type of a student who has malicious intent, craftily going through their degree, buying papers through the whole thing, and really doing a lot of very little effort to learn on their own and just finding ways to get around requirements and take other people's work as their own. And what we really find, it's lack of support skills like time management, note-taking, reference understanding, and then especially the writing skills and the reference skills of paraphrasing and citation. So there's a lot more behind just, oh, they're going to be online and they can find things online to cheat with. And so today we're focused on best practices for online learning that can overcome most of the factors that tempt students to cheat. There are always opportunities for students, but there's so much that you can overcome in a single class. And of course, for the issue of temptation and opportunities, I'll present a few tips at the end after we emphasize strong course design. And something else that's very important to note is that last spring was called emergency remote learning. It was not true online learning. It was a confusing time for both students and for professors, and it really doesn't represent the truth of online learning. And so there likely was a lot more opportunity and temptation, and there's the whole component of confusion. So design matters, and there are a couple of pieces that came out in the last few months about really pointing to how to stop cheating is to teach better. So there's an article, and we will be providing a PDF of slides following the presentation that will have these links. So the best way to stop cheating in online courses, teach better. And a very recent article in Chronicle of Higher Education ends with this quote: "The best approach to reducing cheating is something both simple and hard to realize, especially during a crisis, is better teaching." A way to be proactive about integrity is to use your messaging. This is something that each individual instructor, department chairs, anybody who organizes any kinds of group standardized courses, is focus on what to do and good intentions. So I think a lot of people are thinking about, okay, they have these opportunities. How am I going to cut them off at the pass? I've got to tell them it's wrong. I've got to tell them not to do it. But really, when you focus on what to do and good intentions and treat students with good intentions, the messaging comes across. Linking students to policy and resources. Preparing for skill gaps. So something that's important, we all have internal senses of what we feel students should know at certain points in time in their education. But if there is not a basis you can point at, avoid "they should know this." Make sure that you are putting out there what they should know and link them to resources for what they should know. Using language of the International Center for Academic Integrity's 6 values. These are words that students, every person has connections to these words: honesty and trust and fairness, respect, responsibility, and courage. Those are not lofty academic integrity terms. Those are real terms that mean something in each of our lives and each of our students' lives about their own personal ethics and the person who they want to be. Create a community. We do this. This is what we do. We act with integrity. Discuss intrinsic goals for learning and skill development. Explain to students the why and how it connects to where they're headed in their lives. And of course, if it's a scaffolding assignment, how it's going to help them on the next assignment, but really generally, why is it worth their time to do this? I recently saw a horrifying news clip of a company that does contract cheating, and the owner said, it's when they have fluff work. When students have fluff work is when they call her company for them to do work for them. Every assignment is nobody designs busy work, but explaining why it's not busy work to students, and especially thinking about students who are skeptical about why it's worth their time. I think adding that, enhancing that explanation. And our main title, Convey Got You. I've got you. I'm going to support you. I'm going to support your learning, and I care about your learning, and steer clear of gotcha and stay focused on the learning.
So as Jen said a few minutes ago, we want to just acknowledge the Herculean effort of all of us around all educators to do this quick switch from our traditional way of operating into this emergency remote learning. But in doing so, we really did not set ourselves up for the best experience of what online learning is really like and about. So, first, just congratulations to everyone who survived that tumultuous time and had to pivot so quickly. It was hard, and we got through it. And, I know from my own experience and seeing, what my children and others, colleagues around the country had to deal with, that we, survived, and we did as best we could. And that is to be congratulated, given the circumstances. One of our goals through this presentation, of course, is to help introduce perhaps some new ways of thinking about academic integrity and seeing the opportunity that shifting our mindset can bring into helping our students. And it's not just about, stopping the cheating. It's about empowering the students and helping them understand more and showing their support so that they don't even consider cheating in their courses or in any of their assignments.
We're going to start off with really talking about good course design, because we really believe that solid design will help prevent students from, trying to engage in more nefarious activities. So we want to start today with backward design. Whether you're teaching face-to-face, hybrid, or online, good course design starts with the end in mind, which we commonly refer to as backward design. And I think most of us are probably familiar with this framework, but we don't always practice it. So just to sort of review, the backward design process really can help us clarify our learning goals and our expectations for students. So it starts with identifying the desired results. That is, what do my students need to know and be able to do? Looking at those course outcomes or course objectives. And once we know what it is that we want students to demonstrate mastery of, we can determine acceptable evidence. And that's really where assessment comes in. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about assessment later in the presentation. But once we know what we want from students, then we can decide how we're going to assess their learning. And really only after we've determined those two things should we be planning our instruction and trying to determine, what activities and assignments along the way will help students get to the desired result. And I think I think we've all been in a situation where, we know that this is good course design, but we're busy and, so we start teaching and then we come up with the assessment. But good course design really kind of starts with this framework.
Okay, so I'd like to take a moment to focus and really drill in on that first step that Brandie mentioned, identify desired results. Because as she alluded to, while it's a very familiar step, it can have perhaps unexpected or underestimated positive impact on academic integrity if we do it effectively. Although the terminology used by our respective institutions may vary, learning objectives, competencies, et cetera, the concern driving our work at all of our institutions is the same: student learning. what is it that students should be able to do as a result of their learning experiences, whether it's in a course or overall in a degree program? And the answers to this question are the competencies or learning objectives that we share with our students. And when you create or revise these statements, right, make sure, and I'm sure a lot of you already are doing this, but, make sure, right, to verify that they're clear, meaningful, appropriate to the level of the course, focused on what the student will do, and are observable and measurable, right? So try to avoid using expressions like understand, appreciate, be familiar with, or know, since those aren't really measurable. They're kind of fuzzy. And also you can check that your objectives at all levels, right? If it's a module, a course, a program, so on, are aligned. Because if we've created statements and we can articulate that in ways that have those traits, then we're setting ourselves up for success, and likewise for our students. And those effective competencies or learning objectives serve as an architectural blueprint, right? And they inform our decisions, of course, about resources and activities and assessments to include in our courses. And I am sure that you all have lots of experience with that. But they can also help us build signposts for our students that help them navigate that learning process. So for instance, we can build rubrics based off of those objectives and explain this explicitly to students, encouraging them to use the rubrics to guide and self-assess their work, to help students understand the relationships among the course elements and the purpose of what they're being asked to do. We can explicitly identify which course elements support their achievements of which course or program goals. So for instance, one approach would be to provide a chart or a matrix, right, with this information in the syllabus or a start here module. Another approach would be to add information about the relevant objectives right next to the information about a given activity in your course module, right? So bottom line, students, and I really do believe this, students who understand what they need to do, how their work will be assessed, and how what they're being asked to do will help them to succeed both in the course, but in achieving their own personal goals, are far less likely, in my experience, to make poor decisions that are going to run afoul of our academic integrity policies.
So earlier in the presentation, Jen mentioned that what we're really trying to get to is letting students know that we got them versus, trying to catch them in a gotcha type mentality. And one of the frameworks that we often use in course design and that can really help support students is universal design for learning. UDL is really a framework that's designed to optimize teaching and learning for all students. And it's based on some scientific and it's really designed to serve all learners regardless of their ability or their disability, age, gender, cultural, linguistic backgrounds by removing common barriers to learning. And so there are really kind of three principles that drive UDL. The first is providing multiple means of engagement. So that's really tapping into learners' interests and their motivation by offering adjustable levels of challenge, making content relevant to them, really getting them excited about learning and understanding the why of why they're doing something, as Kate mentioned. So providing multiple means of engagement taps into those effective networks of the brain. The second kind of key piece of UDL is providing multiple means of representation. So we all know that students have different learning preferences. And so if we can present content in multiple forms, whether it's, through reading, because, there are some students that really connect with information through text. But there are also students maybe who will prefer a video or a presentation or some sort of graphic representation. Or there may be students who are more auditory. And so being able to listen to that video or some sort of audio recording, that might just help them connect to the content better. So that's really the what of learning, and it taps into those recognition networks of the brain. And then the last piece we've talked a little bit about, providing multiple means of action and expression. That's that assessment piece. And again, we'll get into kind of assessment design later in the presentation, but giving students the option of how they demonstrate to you that they've mastered the content and the skills required, that can really tap into those strategic networks. So UDL is a great framework for just, really helping to support different learners and differing learning preferences.
Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna just comment on this too about how this relates to academic integrity. And so if students have a smooth path through a course, as opposed to finding roadblocks and where certain aspects of design have not been considered, that's those frustration points. Those are opportunities for the students to get frustrated with the course, and because it's the organization of the course. And so the smoother it is, and also presenting, as Brandie was mentioning, a variety of different ways. And so learning styles has been debunked in psychological science, but what we know from that is exactly what Brandie's saying, is variety for all students. A variety of means is a really successful way to go. And so when it's a smooth path for students, they are more likely to be motivated to work with integrity. So scaffolding, chunking, and sequencing, this gets at these issues of students feeling stress and pressure, extrinsic goals, performance over mastery, because this is the opposite of a big, high stakes, one-time assignment. Scaffolding, chunking, and sequencing decrease performance pressure and increase confidence. An example is a design that I'm working on for the intro psychology course, which is to take the one high stakes paper that comes in week 7 out of week 8 and break it down into smaller chunks, which is where the first part is just a worksheet. But it's a worksheet that actually helps. It walks students through step by step in a question, and it builds you. Take that big paper and you break down what gets students to the big paper. And it starts out with that worksheet and then some practice drafting and then building to the larger paper. So it's not all of a sudden there's this paper in week 7. And of course, as instructors, something, if that is the design and if it is a standardized design, then you can scaffold in announcements. You can scaffold, hey students, it's we're 3 weeks out from the paper. Here's a small thing that you can be doing right now rather than just waiting till week 6 and getting freaked out about the paper. So those are some examples of how you can take the stress and pressure off. Building that confidence is great because they can succeed on one assignment and it motivates them, it gets them engaged with the content to move on to the next steps. Our colleague, Dr. Jeanine Williams, is our program director of writing through the curriculum, and she was not able to be here with us today, but she shared these examples of some elements of sequencing and scaffolding in a first-year writing course assignment. So of course, the research essay is the big work product, but before that comes issue exploration, an annotated bibliography, so that gets students interacting with their sources, a reflective essay that emotionally engages students with the content. And so there are all these different elements that all support and build towards the final research essay. By the way, with any of these examples from Dr. Williams, we are very happy to, if you would like us to pass along questions or some examples from those course materials that we can share out with you. So here's around this is weekly learning activities. So not only those different elements that build to this research essay, but the elements of getting feedback from the instructor at each point in time. And Rob's going to talk a bit more about instructor feedback. Reader responses, so having different responses, having the action of drafting and revising with that feedback, practicing grammar, which is another one of those building blocks towards the eventual essay, and peer review, which engaging with peers. And so this is very different than the all of a sudden you have one very big essay due.
Sorry, my mouse was not moving as fast as my brain, I guess. So we're going to talk a little bit about personalization, differentiation, and choice, because one of the things that we found is that if we're able to personalize an assignment and help students sort of connect with it, the less likely they are to want to go out and cheat or copy others' work. So personalization, it's kind of one of those buzzwords right now that everybody has sort of a different definition. But the way that we look at it is just that it is learning that's tailored to the preferences of various learners, as well as instruction that's paced to a student's unique needs. And so really, I think personalization is about, differentiating based on student need. You can do that through academic goals, having students do some goal setting and work toward those goals. You can do it by kind of differentiating curriculum and content based on student need or method and pace, letting students kind of progress through the content at a pace that works for them. And just to give you an example, I did a project with a K-12 teacher, a marine biology teacher, and we wanted to try to see if we could personalize a unit on coral reefs. And so what we did, we followed our backward design model, and we started with kind of, what the students needed to know, what were the big ideas, which were essentially, why are coral reefs dying, and what can we do to help prevent it. And so then we came up with an authentic assessment. We decided that the students were going to, apply for a fake grant through NOAA. And they were going to have to present to the board of NOAA and explain, why a particular coral reef was decaying. And then we gave them different resources, but really they got to decide how they explored topics to get to the understanding of what's happening with our coral reefs. And they got to decide, what resources they use, what topics they explored. The teacher checked in with them each day to kind of find out where they were on their journey and to make sure that they were, getting all of the information that they needed. But some, the students really enjoyed it. They enjoyed, being able to investigate a topic in depth they were really interested in, and being able to kind of set the pace of their learning. So that's just one way that, we can help students connect to content.
So while a lot of what we're talking about today really relates to the content of the course and the organization of the course and the things that you can do to design your course in a way to promote integrity, we want to just acknowledge the importance of the connection that a student feels with both the course, but also the course instructor and the other students in their course. The more a student feels connected, like this is for them, they're getting benefit out of this, they know you, you know them, the more engaged they're going to be. They do tend to perform better in that course, and they are far more likely to act with integrity. We talk a lot about student interaction, student instructor interaction, student content interaction. It's an incredibly important part of most quality rubrics, actually. You'll find it in Quality Matters and in all of the standard rubrics out there. And it's an important part, but it's sometimes easy to overlook and to think that we need to manage those interactions as much as we need to manage the content of the course. Students really need to feel that personal touch come through in your communication with them. In a minute, I'll talk about feedback to the students, but even just in the normal reminders that you send to students, you can write things with a more personal touch to them. Students really need to feel like they know you and that you know them and understand them. The more successful they'll be if they can feel that sense of connectedness. So some basic examples, even for small or medium-sized courses. You can do individual emails at the start of the term. For larger classes, perhaps you want to consider providing feedback through a video source, just to get that little bit of a FaceTime with them. And then, any well-timed announcements, again, written with that personal touch, pointers, guidance in advance of assignments, responsiveness to their questions. All of those interaction points are critical to the learning and help build that relationship. And I think many of us would agree that the relationship part is one of the most important parts of teaching a course, whether it's face-to-face or online. Jen, will you go to the next slide? Thanks. So one of the ways that we most often engage with our students is providing feedback to them. And that could be feedback through an assignment. It could be, a grading type exercise. But there are lots of different ways to provide feedback to students so that they understand how they're performing and whether or not they're gaining mastery of the content. Feedback, of course, needs to be, immediate. It can't be these long delays that they don't know how they do and they continue to progress with other work, but haven't figured out how they've done on the previous work before. And feedback needs to be ongoing, right? It's not a one and done. It needs to be throughout the course. It's easy to get overwhelmed, both for the student and for the instructor, if you're providing tons of data points and feedback on everything. So consider how you can provide the most impactful feedback. Where are the huge points of focus within any one assignment or activity, and that you can target your feedback on that and not necessarily worry about the feedback for every single thing. Or use one or two examples to illustrate all the other places that the student might need to look. That's just a way to keep it manageable from a cognitive load to the students trying to process it, as well as the time it takes for the instructors to provide all of that feedback. Don't underestimate the value of peer review, their ability to partner and collaborate and talk with their fellow students can go a long way towards helping the students not only gain the feedback and insights that they need, but it also helps them feel more connected, which, as we mentioned, can promote the integrity we're looking for. There's also ways to do, automated feedback with a lot of LMSs, right? You take quizzes and the quiz can automatically give you feedback. Hey, great job, and then not just, yes, you scored correctly, but a little bit, I love how you can, these 2 points are interrelated. If you want to learn more, consider looking over here, or, and a lot of ways that you can automate that. Feedback as a whole group can also be a good time-saving mechanism. Point the themes and trends, and then talk to all of the students and help them understand, and then encourage them to go back and see how that relates to their own specific work. There's a lot of technologies out there that enable both audio and video feedback. And I know some faculty who are doing that rather than just, marking up a paper or getting online and sending an email or typing in a discussion. They're doing a quick audio recording where the students can hear their voice, or a screencast where they can see and hear them as a way to foster that connection again. Of course, any technology solution you're going to use, we want to make sure that it's accessible to everyone as appropriate, but consider alternative ways rather than just marking up a paper, whether that be physically or through track changes, and submitting it back to a student.
Okay, so we've been covering a lot of territory thus far. And so, just as kind of a quick signpost, to use my own term, we've explored ways in which the course design can be leveraged to create online learning environments that are conducive to academic integrity. And we've been providing some examples of approaches that we've been using. As we move kind of into this next section of our presentation, we'll address, and zoom in on the issues related to assessments in particular. So I'll like to launch into this idea of authentic assessments. Brandie mentioned it and Jen has alluded to it as well. What do we mean by authentic? Because every person could potentially define that in a slightly different way. So for the purposes of our conversation today, we consider an assessment to be authentic if it enables students to apply their knowledge and skills to complex issues that are similar to those that they would encounter in professional or so-called real-world contexts. Right? So contextualization provides relevance in the sense that it answers that age-old question, when will I ever use this outside of class? I'm sure you all have heard that at least a couple of times. And it helps students to envision themselves, right, in a particular situation, in a particular profession. The other element of this is complexity, right? That is to say that the fact that there isn't necessarily one right answer, and that encourages critical thinking. So what does this look like for us at UMGC? Well, different programs have taken different approaches, all meaningful. And I'll share a graduate level example, and then Rob will talk a little bit about an undergraduate level course where this manifests. One of the programs that came to mind for me was UMGC's Cloud Computing Architecture program. It's one of several graduate programs that chose to adopt a scenario and project-based approach. And so as students advance through their programs, they complete projects that place them in a variety of roles and situations in a fictional or fictitious company, and that require them to produce authentic professional deliverables, such as a vendor response to a request for proposal, a cloud migration plan, or perhaps a policy document of some sort for this fictitious company. So one concrete example, in one particular course, the student adopts the role of an IT analyst who works for a company that's considering moving its IT infrastructure and services to the cloud. And so project scenarios involve pitching that cloud migration plan to executive, C-suite managers, conducting risk analyses and evaluating providers. So it really does get that meaningful connection. It taps some of the affective elements as well that Brandie was discussing earlier, and they can really immerse themselves and get incremental feedback along the way. So it's not just one big project, it's broken down into steps. So Rob, do you want to talk about PACE?
Absolutely. So PACE is our first year experience course that all undergraduates take upon entering UMGC. The PACE course is actually designed to cover all of your traditional first year experience, helping students make the transition into higher education, connecting them with student services, helping set expectations. It does all of the normal stuff, but it's done with a particular spin, which is program and career exploration. It helps students find or at least explore potential career fields, potential majors, and gives them the opportunity to then submit some of their assignments in deliverables that are appropriate for that industry. So, if you're looking to do something that maybe is more writing intensive, you could, write a more traditional paper. If you're looking for if you're going into a more artistic type field, you could do something more visual. Or, a communication field, you might be doing, a news brief, or, just a variety of options. And the students and the instructor can, we have some pre-designated things, but they can also work together. And that little bit of tailoring really helps the students feel way more connected and engaged. And if you're using the same standard rubric, which you usually can if it's well designed to cover a wide variety of types of assignments, it can go a long way and can make it a little more easy for you to keep some standardization in your courses. But the engagement that the students will get out of that is going to so much help with their feeling connected to the course, to you. They're going to appreciate the opportunity, and definitely it's going to promote that integrity.
And so this slide, I won't talk through it, but I did want to make sure that we included some examples of some alternatives to more traditional high stakes exams or academic papers. So it's sort of, consider this a food for thought, a launching pad for to trigger your imaginations about potential alternatives. Anything from advertisements to newspaper op-eds to, user experience wireframes. There are many, many ways that students can reflect and potentially personalize as well how they demonstrate mastery of the things that you're looking for them to be able to know and be able to do. So enjoy. Okay. All right. So Jen, do you want to kick this one off or should I take the?
Yeah, there are some reasons why an exam cannot be avoided. And so Kate has walked you through a lot of different ways. And this is students show their knowledge through these different types of deliverables that Kate walked you through. And there are some kind of disciplinary reasons, or there are some kind of reasons why an exam might have to be used. And so Kate's going to talk through a few elements, and then I'll talk through a few more about if you absolutely have to do an exam. And before we do that too, I can say testing does show a boost in student learning, but it doesn't have to be a high stakes exam. So an example is to have short quizzes that are low stakes. And so you can still use that element of testing. So Kate, would you kick us off with some of these elements?
Sure. So the first one seems really, really obvious, but it bears repeating because sometimes, despite our best intentions, something might slip through. And so taking that time to just do a quick double check is helpful, is to align your questions, right? If you do need to do some sort of a multiple choice or some other type of standard exam, make sure to double check that each question aligns in some way, shape, or form to the course level learning objectives, the module level learning objectives, things like that. Because that's a good way of validating, right, that you have questions that are going to elicit what you think they're going to elicit and what students have been preparing to do. Corollary to that, right, the way in which we assess students, right, for summative assessments, the exam shouldn't be the first time that students have been assessed in that way. So if you've been, right, their formative assessments have been a lot of multiple choice and short answer, but then the exam is taking it into much more complicated analysis, for instance, there's a mismatch there, and that can be challenging for students as well, and potentially, right, lead to some of those barriers and obstacles and poor choices that Jen alluded to earlier. And again, right, thinking about questions that elicit higher order cognitive skills when possible, right, aiming for those higher reaches on Bloom's, and pairing the type of question, right, to the skill that you're trying to elicit. So multiple choice won't get you to necessarily to an analytical demonstration of analysis skills. Jen?
Yep. And something to know is that if anybody's using a test bank, those questions are out there on the internet. You may know this or not, but Quizlet and other websites, they have the exact wording of the questions from test banks. And so some ways to deal with this reality and to tap into that, what Kate was talking about with higher order cognitive skills, is provide your own example type questions. Gets you both application and the authenticity of a student needing to provide their own example, not just using one in a book. Another one that is not as intense and doesn't take as much time on an exam is to explain the example, to have to explain something and apply it. Another thing is to use a variety of question types, as Kate alluded to that as well. And there are some just sheer kind of cheat proofing things, you know, if we cannot get to students in their motivation in other ways, randomizing both questions and answers, especially the first few, and then periodically. You picture that students, two students sitting, like communicating with each other during the exam. And if they don't have the same first questions, then they might give up trying to collaborate on those, even though you have told them that you cannot communicate with other people during the exam. Modify the wording if you like a test bank question. Some of us have found, you know, I definitely know there are some test bank questions I absolutely loved, but just modify the wording of them. So if a student searches them, they cannot find them, and set limited time. Another one that's not, so the time, actually, let me explain that a little bit more. You want to allow adequate time so those who are anxious about time tests are not completely apoplectic about the time, but you don't want to set time so that students have time to look everything up, especially if you're doing some more factual types of questions. And something else is really to be realistic that online exams need to be the setting that students are taking them in, with open book, open notes, open internet, open materials. There are tools to try to deal with some of those issues. There are some proctoring tools. There are some other things, but we really recommend designing exams for the student setting where they realistically do have access to materials. And then that also leads, it takes away the memorization part and gets them into those higher level questions. So there are a lot of benefits of designing an exam that way if you do need to use an exam. And I did allude to some study help websites at a couple different points. So there are all kinds of ways for students to get answers, and to find other students' papers that are uploaded and filed, peer-to-peer file sharing parts of websites. And so for that small number of students, so if you've done everything that we have recommended, you are engaged with your students, you have this great backwards design, you have wonderful relationships with your students, you know, this will get most students, but occasionally there are those, and especially under stress and pressure, desperation. A couple of different other aspects of plagiarism proofing, you know, after you do the engaging design, is rotate topics, rotate assignment names, change part of the assignment, use personal examples as part of the assignment. The goal is that what students find online from prior iterations of the class should not look like what you are assigning. And so this can be done by switching some things around. There are different levels at which that you can change some things, but just to take away that temptation for a student to download one of those assignments in one of those quote study help sites, and to directly copy things into their paper, that to make it different enough. And if you look at it carefully, it sounds like it could be really time consuming to do that, but actually just by switching a few things around, switching a few terms, renaming the assignment, that can really help with some of those, just that bit of temptation that students may have. All right, so we are at our question and answer time. And let's see if we have questions in the chat. We don't see any, but this would be a great time for you to chat your questions.
We did such a good job. There's just no questions left.
We've covered it all.
Exactly.
Apparently. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be the person who interrupts, and I just unmuted, but I did want to ask one question. It was back from the beginning because you talked about it may be hard to accept, but you said sometimes the answer is just better teaching. Do you encounter a lot of faculty resistance when you, I mean, to me, it would seem like more work to do some of the things that you implemented. So how do faculty respond when you discuss these things?
Actually, I'm going to answer first, and I'd like to get other folks' perspective as well. But when I've talked about scaffolding assignments, particularly, it's like, oh, this sounds like so much more time because now you have 3 assignments instead of 1. But that first assignment, if it's like worksheet style and it's just an introductory way for students to start interacting with assignments, it's really easy to grade. And then when you move on to the students' next round, you've already seen their stuff and you're familiar with their topic. So it's more time at the beginning and less time at the end. And that's the same thing with the relationship building, that if you don't build relationships at the beginning, you are more likely to have more problems, more difficult kinds of questions, more conflictual kinds of questions later. So it's like backwards design and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree, Jen. You know, I've done, I teach a course where teachers are developing a professional development plan. And when I sort of inherited the course, you know, they just kind of turned the whole plan in at one time. And over time, I started breaking it into pieces so that they were submitting just a section at a time, and I could look at it and give them feedback. And what I found is when I got to the full graded assignment at the end, they were so, like, the products that I was getting were so much better. And so that final grading was a breeze. And it was also really almost, I don't want to say fun, but like almost fun, because you're getting good stuff.
Exactly.
There's also, you know, there are easier ways to implement some of these things. I mean, some of them are going to take a little bit of effort, but, you know, Jen was talking a lot about examples and, you know, making relevant. We have, there's a particular program at our institution that tends to have a lot of academic integrity issues. And, you know, rightfully so, the faculty and the program directors don't want to completely reinvent the course every single semester, or redo all the assessments every semester. So we changed the data set, right? Same questions, same project, one piece of paper has a fictitious company and all the information about that company. So now we change one page every semester, and that pretty much blows up, you know, any potential of reuse from one semester to the other. So all the questions are same, all the activities are the same, everything is the same, except the variables have changed. And that makes it so easy to, you know, for the faculty to do it. They just want, every semester you change one piece of paper. That was a good question.
Yeah. And in fact, I had thought, I had wished I had addressed it. So I'm very glad it came up.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm not seeing a lot of other questions coming in. So I think we can go ahead and just sort of wrap up. So let me thank everyone for coming on behalf of all of us who are presenting, as well as Maryland Online. After this webinar is posted to the Maryland Online YouTube channel, you'll receive a link from MOL with the link, as well as a handout that Jen and the rest of us have prepared with this presentation. I'll have the links. Also have some resources at the end where you can learn more information about some of these. And of course, I am more than happy to help answer any questions, and I'm pretty sure my colleagues are as well. So if there's anything that we could help you with, please feel free to reach out. We're all on LinkedIn, or Wendy or Kathleen from Maryland Online can certainly help connect you back to us. And I see some of my other UMGC colleagues on the calls too, so they know how to reach us. So thank you all very much. I appreciate the time this morning, and look forward to our work together. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Everyone.